was wild under the lights last Saturday night, and it will be again next week when Missouri is in town. But this week, it's Nashville. John Strickland will be there. Glad to have you, my man. Carolina looking to get bowl eligible this weekend and win their 15th straight against the Vanderbilt Commodores, and they're coming in with some momentum because they punished the Aggies under the lights last weekend.
Yeah, what a fun game. Me and Brewer were talking about it last night. It's probably the most fun we've had in the stands in a while, probably since the Tennessee game. I mean, we had a good time, that's for sure.
Yeah, it was John, I've mentioned this a couple of times this week. It was first of all, I liked the maturity of the football team because they got out once again this year. Remember the days of, oh man, they just can't get off they're getting off to slow start. Nope. Right out of the gates, here they come. And then A&M, discipline. They play sound football. They don't beat themselves, so it's hard to beat them. They come back, they take the lead. Carolina goes into halftime by kicking a field goal and tying this thing up. So, it's not like momentum shifted or anything like that. You could feel the maturity. And then in the second half, once again, the defense took over. So you're talking about now in the last 4 games with 3 of the best offenses in the league, the Tide, the Aggies, and the Rebels. Oklahoma is, of course, in that mix as far as who they played. There's 4, but those 3 offenses, a total of 22 points has been given up in the second half between those 4 games. That is just outstanding.
I'm going to be honest with you. I thought in the Beamer era, I thought the coaching and playing just overall team was the best half of football I've seen in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Defense just stymied them, and the offense just continued to do what they needed to do and scored 24 points. So it was a great second half, and hopefully we keep carrying that over to this coming weekend.
Yeah, LaNorris Sellers really probably had his best overall game. John, what'd you see from him?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I thought the offensive line played really well, but LaNorris kept us from having about 3 sacks by what he was able to do. It was very impressive. I even got texts on my phone from friends of mine that are not Gamecock fans, but they were watching the game on TV, and they were like, man, this reminds me of Cam Newton 2010 out here on the field.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, he had some drop balls too. So, his completion percentage wasn't but around 50%, but there's probably 3 or 4 drop balls, which would have pumped it up into the 60% range. So, I thought he played a hell of a game.
Yeah, which is about where he's been.
Yeah.
This year. It just, like we were talking to Pat about it on I think Monday or Tuesday, just how slow the game felt for him. Like I felt calmer watching the game, watching him than I have all season long. It seemed like everything they threw at him, he was prepared. Of course, he did have 2 weeks to prepare, but he was prepared. He was collected. And the you mentioned the offensive line. I think those guys fed off of that energy, particularly in the second half.
Yeah, man, I watched the offensive line pretty closely. I went back and watched the game, and man,
Yeah.
I just thought they played a hell of a game, especially in the run game. I mean, they just killed it. There's some missed assignments still that happened during that game on pass blocking.
Mm-hmm.
And those are some of the ones where LaNorris was able to break the tackle and make something happen. But man, overall, I thought they just played a hell of a game.
That's just got to be deflating. I mean, I know you weren't a defensive lineman, but if you're the defense or a linebacker and you've got a clear-cut shot and you run right smack into him, and then he somehow twists around and gets out of there and completes a pass downfield or scrambles for 20 yards, I can only imagine how deflating that is for a defense. I mean, you've been a part of football teams that have had that happen to them. It can spread in a hurry. I think it did last week.
Well, I mean, it's just like, you sitting there as a fan, if that happened to your team, You know, say if we were in the backfield to get a sack and all of a sudden they complete a 20-yard pass, it's very frustrating. And for a player, it's very frustrating for them, which, I think that helped us out a little bit. It, causes frustrating inside those players' heads, frustration, and maybe it caused them to lose a little focus.
Well, I was watching very closely in the second half, flipping it to the other side of the ball here too. I was watching very closely, and we're going to come back to the offense in a second. But the type of energy that A&M and South Carolina would have, particularly early, and I mentioned the stat earlier from the defense, John. But I felt like A&M's defense. What I don't want to say they didn't have energy. That's not fair to them. They did. They were playing in a college football game in an electric atmosphere, certainly. But they had lost a step, and Carolina had gained a step. I don't know exactly what Clayton White is doing at halftime, and he's always kind of been a halftime guy. I know some fans haven't liked it. Why did you take him to halftime to make adjustments? I don't know the answer to that, and I'm not saying even that they're wrong, especially in some games where it's like maybe we should do that, before the second quarter, not the second half. But and you had in the second half of the game the other night, the offense and the defense played such complementary football, and it was easy to see that offense, running the football and Josh Simon and all the things we're sitting here talking about, the offensive linemen and how well they run blocked. But then the defense goes out there and like, hey, man, don't worry. You're going to have plenty of chances because these guys aren't going anywhere. And it felt like the longer the game went on, the more that Marcel Reed was kind of throwing his hands up and going, I don't know, whatever. I hadn't seen anything like this year. And he ended up throwing that pick to our guy, O'Donnell Fortune.
Yeah, I think especially in a game like this past weekend, you've seen two quarterbacks on tape, right? So you got to prepare for both. It's just not like you can, all right, we're just going to prepare for this. So, I'm sure there were some wrinkles that happened in the first half that A&M had that maybe we weren't quite ready for, but you get that first half to be able to see what's going on. And then at halftime, you go in, you make the adjustments. All the coaches get together, and then they get with the players, and you make some adjustments. And that's a sign of a great coach. So I think that's why a lot of the times this year, the defense has been so much better the second half than it has the first half. Well, it's been pretty dang good the first half, too. I mean, let's just go back to the Oklahoma game. So, but yeah, I think that's part of it.
Well, I mean, John, they're the per Pro Football Focus, they're the second highest graded defense in college football by 0.7 points behind the Texas Longhorns.
And Texas hasn't played the offenses we've played.
No. That's one of the things that I think going into the matchup this weekend. Like you look at the running lanes that were created last week, and Rocket proves once again, just give me a little room. You don't have to give me a ton, just give me a little bit, and I'll get out of there. Josh Simon, what a job by Dowell Loggins and his staff scouting. That we got word on Sunday that was one of the things they identified in all that film was, all right, A&M, one of the weak points of their defense, they are good up front. But getting the football to the tight end is something that you can do against these guys. And South Carolina just happens to have an NFL tight end in Josh Simon, right? So they had an excellent job of scouting. You're talking about these linemen who it felt like, John, the longer they stayed on the field and created these running lanes, still got to get some of the pass stuff shored up, obviously, but the better that it got. The game was slowing down for LaNorris Sellers. You look at the defensive side of the football, they continue to stay fresh over there. Just got the news a little while ago that Kyle Kennard has been named a semifinalist for the Lombardi Award, which is nuts. Dylan Stewart, freshman of the week, all these things. And you look at this game this weekend against Vanderbilt. John, I don't like the matchup for the Commodores. And generally, I don't come out and say things like that. Matter of fact, if I ever do, it's against South Carolina.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt is a great story, and they very well could beat the Gamecocks this weekend. But I don't like the matchup because of the depth for South Carolina. and where the Gamecocks playmakers exist, I don't think that matches up well for Vandy.
Yeah, I definitely think we have an advantage on both sides of the ball this weekend. I think our defense, especially our front seven versus their offensive line, has a distinct advantage versus the Vandy offensive line. But that Pavia guy, he's fun to watch. He's something else. So we can say all this, but somehow that guy just has a magic ball and is able to make stuff happen this year. So we'll see how it goes. But I do agree with you that our DBs versus their receivers and our front seven versus their front, I think it's hands down advantage Gamecocks on this one.
Yeah, I like Pavia. I mean,
Oh yeah,
what's great about him is he doesn't make a ton of mistakes, right?
yep.
He's thrown 3 picks this year. That's it. Just 3 picks. Now he's not overly accurate, or at least he hasn't been in the last handful of games. Only completing about 50% of his passes if you actually go pull the numbers. But a lot of those completions are coming in crucial times to be able to continue to move the football down the field. I know they played Texas, and I just gave you the stat, so I don't want to be contradicting, that says that per PFF, the Texas Longhorns, kind of have the best defense in the country when you look at the ratings versus who they played and this, that, and the other. I'm not so sure, though, that Texas has the strengths that this defense does, in particular on the edges, the way that the Gamecocks have them, and in the secondary. And, so Carolina this year, they could have issues Saturday. I don't want to jinx them at all. And again, to your point, I like Pavia, but they have had success with the dual threat guy, and he is every sense of that word. So if they're going to force him to do some things he's not comfortable doing, and this secondary continues to be who they are, I like that version of Carolina's defense better than the Longhorns. And that's where I think a lot of this lands. Like, he has not made a lot of mistakes, but if there's anybody that can force you into mistakes, it's one of the best teams in the country that does that in the Gamecocks.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think our defensive ends are going to be a tough matchup for Vandy's offensive tackles. Just from what I've seen, I've watched some of Vandy this year. I think, which, let's be real, our 2 defensive ends have caused problems for just about every team we've played this year. So I think that's one advantage we have, and I agree. I think we're going to get after this quarterback, because you can't let him get comfortable, and then definitely can't let him pull and run that ball, because he's really good at that. I mean, he's just like what you just said. So you're going to have a game plan for that, and I think it'll be maybe something similar towards the A&M game plan. I mean, A&M, the Reed guy, we saw what he did versus LSU, right? Comes in and runs all over them. And we had a plan for it, and we stopped him. I think we held him to 46 yards the whole game, 48, something like that, somewhere right in there. So I think that's the key to this game, is slowing their quarterback down, because he's shown how good of a player is this year. And you go back and watch what he did versus Bama. I mean, man, it was impressive.
Yeah, and everything I just said, I mean that respectfully. I actually think if you take him and put him on an even better team than Vanderbilt, he's a mature kid. He's been around a while,
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference in him and like Marcel Reed. Like, if you look at Marcel Reed, more athletic kid than Diego Pavia. I'm not so sure that Diego Pavia would even argue that. But this guy has played much more football.
Yeah.
And now he's got some big wins under his belt. Shane is a master motivator, as we well know. He'll take things and find. I mean, just last week, what did he say on Saturday night, John? After the game, he stayed in Coach Day's ear all week and the rest of the strength staff, and reminded them that there was a national article out about Texas A&M's strength and conditioning program. No word about the Gamecocks, and that was a little bit of a motivating factor. I mean, he finds things. What do you think I know that he has not really said anything about paying attention to the college football playoff rankings. They're 5-3. You know, that record doesn't argue that they should be in the top 25, but when you go back and look at the actual body of work, it does. And he knows that. Do you think he's using that as motivation? Hey, look at that. They think Louisville's better. They think Missouri is better than you are. Do you think that's come up?
Oh, 100% it's come up. I can promise you that. And I know Shane briefly mentioned it, Tuesday, about, hey, they're ranked, we're not. So clearly they're the better team in everybody's eyes. So we got a big task ahead of us. That's just a little, hey, let the players know this is what they think of you. They think Vandy's better than you. I think it's big motivation, and I love the motivation about the strength coach stuff because, half the fan base wanted the whole thing redone and Luke Day gone, after last season because of all the injuries. But, that it's not always because of the strength coach. Sometimes you just have bad luck and stuff happens, as they say. And Shane's been good at that, and I think he's got some things up his sleeves internally this week to get these guys ready to go in the right mindset.
What do you think this November looks like, John? This slate, this trip, Missouri, Wofford, and then obviously the trip to the upstate. Who Clemson last week, obviously, very much so struggled against Louisville. Are they better than all four teams left?
In my opinion, today, after what I've seen so far, yes. Clemson, man, it's just been so hard to gauge them this year. They played Georgia the first game of the year, scored 3 points. Okay. We've seen what Georgia's looked like. I would put our team up against anybody in the SEC right now, honestly. I think we can beat any team in our league. I think we can play with any team in the country. And after what I've seen from Clemson so far, I mean, they haven't played anybody. So I look at that one at the end of the year. I mean, they just haven't played anybody, and then they run against a pretty solid Louisville team, and they get beat. I mean, they get beat bad. I know the score wound up being 10 points, but they got beat worse than that if you watch that whole game. So then you look at Missouri. I know they have some health issues. They don't have that defense they had last year that was so good that just helped them in every game. They lost so many guys. So I don't know, man. I said this going into the A&M game last week. I was like, you can win every single one of the games in November, or there's 4 of them you could possibly lose. It could go either way. And I still feel that, but I feel better about where our team is here over the past 3 weeks with the Oklahoma game, how the defense has looked. You know what? The defense has been good all year long. Yeah. Man, it seems like they just keep getting better and better and better and better every single week. And that's what you want to see out of a football team. You don't want to see your best in week 1. You want to see your best in November. So, I'm pretty pumped about what we got going forward. And I don't see any reason you can't win we've already won 1, but win these next 4 in a row. I think there's a really good chance if everybody just does what they're supposed to do their job, and take care of business. I just feel like we have a more talented roster than everybody we're going to play.
The spread in the game tomorrow has been bet up. Carolina now 4.5 point favorites. I think maybe others starting to see some of what we have been seeing too. John, I think a lot of what you're saying also has to do with the health and development of LaNorris Sellers. And I said health first because I actually believe when you talk about the college football playoff, dude, had he not gone down in the first half of that LSU game, I think they would have won the game.
Yep.
And I think yesterday's rankings, they would have been somewhere between 12 and 15, knocking on the door.
Yep.
And when you have a quarterback, you have a chance if you've got other things like South Carolina does.
Yep.
Exactly. If you go back to that point, the last 2 years, there's a guy, the quarterback here before was a guy named Spencer Rattler. Some of you might remember him. Shane Beamer in November, going back to his first year, is pretty good. In November of 21, they beat Florida, and they beat shoot, did they beat Kentucky that year? I can't remember. They beat somebody else in November, but I can't remember who it was. Obviously, November in 22, Tennessee went down, Clemson went down. Have beaten, I think last year they beat Kentucky, or A&M was in November, I believe, last year. They won a lot of games in November. What do you see out of his teams from like September to November, year in and year out? Like, is there anything that comes to mind where you're like, well, I can tell you right now, this is one of the reasons why that continues to happen?
I mean, honestly, I think it just comes down to coaching. I think it comes down to the leadership in the building, relaying it down to the players. So, whenever you see teams like ours have, every year Beamer's been here. Obviously, we still got all November, so let's knock on wood. But every year Beamer's been here, the team has shown so much improvement by the time the month of November rolls around. And I think that just comes down to the leadership and coaching in the building. And I'm talking about the leadership from the player side, the leadership from the coaching side, and what the coaches are doing to prepare this football team. And I think Beamer and the staff have just done a hell of a job since his tenure here. And I think that's what has allowed to be so good in the month of November in his tenure here. And that's a great sign, because you want to be playing your best ball, when it gets to the back end of the season in November, because that's when everything starts. That's when stuff starts really meaning something. It's like last year we were, 2-6, and we roll off 3 in a row in November. And man, that Clemson game, those guys want that one back so bad. Clemson had no business beating us last year at home, but we were just so beat up on the offensive line. We just couldn't do anything that game. But I think this just shows sign of great leadership and great coaching inside the building.
Yeah. Well, they're gonna need it this weekend. Got a lot of respect for Clark Lee and what he's doing at Vanderbilt. Nobody saw that coming. One of the things Vanderbilt has done pretty well throughout the season, John, they have finished games. They get to the fourth quarter and they're still very much in it. And if it's close, they've been able to put some points on the board and things like that. That's why they're bowl eligible. So we got to tip our caps to them. What's important early tomorrow? What are your keys?
I mean, to me, we got to score early. All right, we got to get the ball. We got to score early, and we got to stop them. I think it's got to be very similar to what happened this past weekend, because you put pressure when you can get up by a score or two early. It puts pressure on the other team. Really does.
Yeah.
Puts pressure on them to, okay, all right, we got to do something. So it's a little bit more of a panic, So I think that's the big key to the game tomorrow, starting the game out, getting points, defense playing well, 3 and outs. Love to see those. Those are my favorite, unless we're on offense. But I think that's some big keys to the game right there to get it going early. And then, our offensive defensive line, repeat what you did this past weekend. On the line of scrimmage, dominate up front. And if you do that 9 times out of 10, you're going to win the football game. Yeah. So I think that's the biggest key to the game. And, man, when you're on the road, you cannot turn the ball over. All right, that's a big, big thing. When you're on the road, you cannot turn the ball over. It's such a killer to the team when you turn the ball over on the road, especially because you don't have the crowd behind you to help, even though I think we'll probably have 15,000 Gamecock fans there. But
it is sold out.
Yeah. Well, listen, I know a bunch of people rolled out of Columbia and Charleston this morning because I have friends already there that flew out this morning. And I looked at our flight because my buddy was going to try and get one, and there's no flights out of Columbia to get out of here tomorrow because every flight is completely full.
Wow.
So what does that tell you?
Well, it tells me, number one, people are excited about the football team. Number two, people love Nashville.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm a pretty high status on Delta because I fly so much. Well, I was like, all right, yeah, I'm gonna get upgraded. Maybe I'll get a first class upgrade. Heck no, every seat on that plane is full, and I'm down the upgrade list. So, that's the flight from Atlanta to Nashville too. So, Yeah, a lot of Gamecocks going to be in town.
Man, can't even get Big John on the flight upgrade list. Boy, times are changing quick, man.
Yeah.
Well,
And one
John,
thing
here's
to go back to, I just want to say one thing while we were talking about offense. We were talking about LaNorris, yeah, the LSU game, first half in that game, he was 9 of 16 for 113 yards, and he had 88 yards rushing with a touchdown, or 2 touchdowns, 2 touchdown runs. All right, we lose him at the end of the first half. He doesn't play the rest of the game. If he plays, we win that game by 2 scores, no doubt. And then him not being able to really do much because of that ankle for 2 weeks. That LSU game, you had already started seeing progression, and you saw it the week before at Kentucky. Well, I think those 2 weeks being out kind of hurt him, especially for that Ole Miss game. You could just tell him and Rocket were not 100% that Ole Miss game, and we just couldn't get nothing going. We came out flat. I think this past week, everybody's healthy, and we saw what the 2 weeks of preparation really did. And now you just got to take it down the home stretch. So I like what I see from a healthy LaNorris and a healthy Rocket. It looks pretty good.
It's expected to be wet in Nashville. The
I know.
Forecast is 61% in the afternoon, 80% in the evening, and this game kicks at 3:15 local time. So I'm going to go with 70.
I already told my wife, pack your rain jacket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pack the rain jacket and get to the bar early.
Well, that shouldn't be a problem in Nashville.
I think you figure that out. Here's a stat for you, by the way. You mentioned the fast starts. Ole Miss obviously got out to a quick start in Carolina because because of everything. It was just a putrid day.
Yeah.
It was 14-0 in the first half there for the Rebels. Outside of that, this year in SEC games, Gamecocks total are outscoring SEC opponents in the first quarter 49-24. Take away that pitiful day against the Rebels, 49-10 in the first quarter.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we got to keep rolling. Got to keep that going.
With all that weather, just expect to see a lot of Rocket Sanders and a lot of LaNorris Sellers. I got a feeling. And their 4 legs combined. John, safe travels to Nash Vegas. Give Patrick Davis a big old hug for me, man. Y'all have a blast tomorrow night at the Bluebird.
Yep, and I may pop on tomorrow afternoon for the last little segment to get my picks in. So we'll see how the timing goes. I'll text you though after I land and all that stuff.
By the way, I think next Friday, I believe you and Michael will have Coach Mangus sitting in with you as well.
Unfortunately, I'm going to.
Oh, that's right.
I'm going to be flying back from San Diego to get back for the Missouri game.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I gotta go work, man. Got to fly out to San Diego on Wednesday, and then I'm leaving first thing in the morning, Friday morning to haul ass back.
Well, at least we'll get to see you Saturday. So
yeah.
Either way, hey, we always appreciate you, brother. Have a wonderful trip. It's going to be hopefully a great weekend for the Gamecocks.
All right, man. We'll pull them through. Hopefully.
Thanks, John.
All right. See y'all.
There you go. The great John Strickland.